You don't belong here, boy. This is first class, not a charity row. The words sliced through the cabin like broken glass. Karen Mitchell's manicured finger jabbed toward the window seat where 16-year-old Jeremiah Washington sat quietly, his worn hoodie a stark contrast to the leather upholstery. Flight 447 to Los Angeles hadn't even taken off yet. Other passengers turned to stare. Some pulled out phones. A few nodded in agreement with the middle-aged white woman whose voice carried the authority of someone used to being heard. Jeremiah didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there with a calmness that seemed to irritate Karen even more. "Did you hear me?" She stepped closer, designer heels clicking against the aircraft floor. "Security needs to handle this before we're all stuck up here with—" She gestured dismissively. The flight attendant approached hesitantly. Jeremiah reached into his jacket pocket, fingers closing around something that made him almost smile. "Have you ever been so certain someone didn't belong somewhere that you risked everything to prove it?" The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brief delay. Departure is pushed back 10 minutes while we resolve a passenger seating issue." Karen Mitchell's eyes lit up like she'd won the lottery. This was validation, proof she was right. She pulled out her iPhone, fingers flying across the screen. Within seconds, she was broadcasting live on Instagram. "Good morning, everyone. Karen here, and you won't believe what I'm dealing with on my flight today." The phone's camera swept toward Jeremiah, who was reading something on his own device. He looked up briefly, made eye contact with her lens, then returned to his screen without expression. "I fly first class at least twice a month for work," Karen continued, her voice taking on that particular tone of authority that corporate executives perfect over years of boardroom meetings. "And I can tell when someone clearly doesn't belong in this section." Flight attendant Lisa Rodriguez watched from the galley, her training warring with her instincts. Protocol said to de-escalate. Common sense said something wasn't right about this whole situation. Karen's viewer count climbed. 50 people were watching, then 100. "Ma'am," Lisa approached while practicing diplomacy. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Yes, actually." Karen lowered her phone but kept recording. "That young man is obviously in the wrong seat. I need to see his boarding pass." "I can't ask passengers to show their boarding passes to other passengers," Lisa replied carefully. Karen's laugh was sharp. "Then you check it, because I guarantee you he's supposed to be in the economy. Look at him." Jeremiah was indeed an unlikely figure in first class. His jeans were clean but well-worn. His sneakers had seen better days. The hoodie was from a local high school, not some expensive brand. Everything about his appearance suggested someone who scraped together enough money for a basic ticket. But appearances, as Lisa had learned in her 8 years of flying, could be deceiving. "Sir?" Lisa addressed Jeremiah directly. "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" Jeremiah looked up from his phone. His eyes held something Lisa couldn't quite identify. Not defiance, not anger. Something calmer, more certain. "Of course." His voice was quiet, polite. He reached into his jacket, not the hoodie pocket, but an inside jacket pocket Lisa hadn't noticed before, and pulled out his boarding pass. The paper was different. Heavier stock, platinum-colored instead of the usual white or blue. Lisa glanced at it, and her eyebrows rose slightly. She looked at Jeremiah again, then at the boarding pass, then back at him. "Thank you, sir. Everything appears to be in order." Karen's face flushed. "Let me see it." "Ma'am, I can't share another passenger's boarding information." "This is ridiculous!" Karen's voice rose, and her Instagram audience was eating it up. Comments flooded in, mostly supportive. "Stand your ground, Karen! You're protecting everyone! Don't back down!" The viewer count hit 300. Another passenger, David Kim, had been watching the whole scene unfold. He was a tech executive himself, recognized the type immediately. He'd seen this kind of entitlement before. What bothered him was how sure Karen seemed, how convinced that she was doing the right thing. David quietly opened his Twitter app and started recording. Meanwhile, an elderly couple in seats 2A and 2B whispered between themselves. She's not wrong, the husband murmured. That boy does seem out of place. His wife nodded. In my day, people dressed appropriately for air travel. But across the aisle, a young black woman traveling with her infant son watched with growing anger. She knew exactly what this was. She'd lived it herself. Karen was gaining momentum now. I'm not trying to be difficult, she announced to her growing audience. But airline security is everyone's responsibility, especially after everything that's happened in recent years. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jeremiah finally spoke. Ma'am, I understand your concern about safety. His voice was steady, mature beyond his apparent years, but I assure you, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Something in his tone made Lisa look at him more carefully. There was an authority there, a weight that seemed odd for someone so young. Karen wasn't having it. Look, kid, I don't know how you got that boarding pass, but... Flight departure now delayed 15 minutes, came the pilot's announcement. We apologize for the inconvenience. Karen smiled triumphantly at her phone. See? They're taking this seriously. What she didn't know was that the delay had nothing to do with Jeremiah's presence in first class. The captain had been making phone calls, checking passenger manifests, confirming something that would change everything. Jeremiah's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not worry, exactly. More like anticipation. He typed back quickly, then slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. The same pocket where he kept something else. Something he hadn't shown anyone yet. Lisa Rodriguez was watching him carefully now. 8 years of reading passengers had taught her to recognize when someone was carrying more than they appeared to be carrying. And this teenager, sitting calmly while being publicly accused and humiliated, was definitely carrying something. The question was, what? 8 minutes until mandatory departure, the gate agent's voice echoed through the jet bridge speakers. Ground supervisor Marcus Williams climbed aboard, his company badge glinting under the cabin lights. 23 years with the airline had taught him to handle difficult passengers, but this situation felt different, more charged. Karen immediately pounced. Finally, someone with authority. She turned her phone toward Marcus, addressing her audience. This is exactly why I document everything, people. You have to hold companies accountable. Her viewer count had exploded. 800 people watching live. Comments flooding faster than she could read them. Most supportive, but a growing number questioning her motives. Ma'am, I'm Marcus Williams, Ground Operations Supervisor. I understand there's been some confusion about seating. Not confusion, Karen corrected sharply. Fraud. That boy is clearly not supposed to be in first class. She gestured toward Jeremiah, who was now looking out the window with the patience of someone who'd been in similar situations before. Marcus glanced at his tablet, scrolling through the passenger manifest. His brow furrowed slightly as he found the relevant entry. Sir, he addressed Jeremiah, could I please see your identification and boarding pass? David Kim was still recording on Twitter, his thread gaining traction. Hashtag first-class racism was starting to trend in Atlanta. His followers were sharing rapidly, the story spreading beyond the confines of the aircraft. Meanwhile, in the back of the plane, economy passengers were craning their necks to see what was happening. Flight attendants were fielding questions from confused travelers who could hear raised voices but couldn't see the source of the commotion. What's the holdup? Complained a businessman in row 12. Some of us have connections to make. Jeremiah reached for his wallet with deliberate calm. As he did, something fell from his jacket pocket, a leather portfolio, expensive-looking despite its worn edges. He quickly retrieved it, but not before several passengers noticed the embossed logo on the front. Here you go. Jeremiah handed over his driver's license and the platinum boarding pass. Marcus studied them carefully. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. He looked at Jeremiah again, then back at the documents, then at his tablet screen. His fingers started scrolling more urgently through the passenger information. "This is taking too long," Karen announced to her phone. "How hard is it to verify a fake ticket?" Her Instagram Live had attracted attention beyond casual viewers now. Travel bloggers were sharing the stream. News outlets were monitoring social media for trending stories. Karen's moment of self-righteousness was becoming something much bigger than she'd intended. "Ma'am," Marcus said slowly, "I need you to lower your voice and end your live stream." "Absolutely not. This is America. I have rights." The young mother with the infant had heard enough. "You have the right to be racist on social media?" she called out. "Racist?" Karen whirled around, her phone camera capturing her indignant expression. "This has nothing to do with race. This is about proper procedures and airline security. I'd question anyone who looked out of place." But her face was flushed now, her voice climbing to that pitch that betrayed exactly what this was really about. The elderly couple was whispering more urgently. "She's making a scene," the wife murmured. "Maybe we should stay out of it." Other passengers were taking sides, the cabin dividing into factions. Some pulled out their own phones to record. Lisa Rodriguez was calling for backup, speaking quietly into her headset while trying to maintain order. A gate agent appeared at the aircraft door, followed by 2 airport security officers. The situation was escalating beyond a simple passenger dispute. Marcus was still staring at his tablet. Something on that screen was making him very uncomfortable. His face had gone from professional concern to something approaching panic. "Sir," one of the security officers addressed Marcus, "we got a call about a passenger issue?" Marcus stammered, looking between his tablet and Jeremiah. "I think there might be a misunderstanding here." "No misunderstanding," Karen declared, turning her camera toward the security team. "That teenager is sitting in first class with what's obviously a fraudulent ticket. Remove him so we can all get where we're going." Karen's viewer count had hit 1,200. The comments were coming so fast they were just a blur of text. #first-class fraud was starting to compete with #first-class racism as hashtags spread across social platforms. 5 minutes to mandatory departure, came the announcement. "We need to resolve this now," Marcus said, but his authority seemed shaken. His hands were actually trembling as he held the tablet. That's when Captain James Foster emerged from the cockpit. 30 years of flying. Former Air Force pilot. He'd seen everything from terrorist scares to medical emergencies. But right now, walking down the aisle toward the commotion in first class, he looked nervous. Karen immediately redirected her phone toward him. "Captain, thank God. Please remove this passenger so we can depart on time." Captain Foster looked at Karen, then at Marcus, then his eyes found Jeremiah. The teenager was watching him with interest now, no longer gazing out the window. "Mr. Washington," the captain said quietly. Not son, not young man. Mr. Washington. The formality hung in the air like a question mark. Karen's live stream audience caught it immediately. Comments exploded with speculation. "Why is the captain being so respectful? Something's not right here. This kid must be somebody important." "Captain Foster," Jeremiah replied, standing for the first time since the confrontation began. As he rose, his presence seemed to change. He was tall for 16, nearly 6 feet, and there was something in his posture that hadn't been obvious while he was seated. A kind of natural authority that made people unconsciously step back and give him space. Even the security officers seemed to sense it. They exchanged glances, suddenly less certain about why they'd been called. "I apologize for the delay," Captain Foster said, his voice carrying the deference usually reserved for VIP passengers. "Not your fault," Jeremiah replied calmly. "Though we should probably get underway soon. I have a board meeting at 2. A board meeting. Not a meeting. A board meeting. Karen was still filming, but confusion was creeping into her commentary. "I don't understand what's happening here. Why is everyone treating this kid like he's—" She trailed off as Captain Foster leaned down and whispered something in Jeremiah's ear. The teenager nodded, then reached for his leather portfolio. Marcus Williams had gone pale. Whatever was on his tablet screen had finally clicked into place. He was staring at Jeremiah like he'd seen a ghost. "Oh no," he whispered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Oh God, no." David Kim's Twitter thread had gone viral. 25,000 retweets and climbing. Major news accounts were picking it up. Hashtag #first-class racism was trending nationally now, with subsidiary hashtags spawning by the minute. But the people on the plane were about to discover that all those hashtags were missing a crucial piece of information. Lisa Rodriguez approached Captain Foster. "Sir, should I prepare for departure?" "Give us one more moment," the captain replied, his eyes never leaving Jeremiah. The teenager opened his portfolio with deliberate care. The cabin fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and Karen's continued live stream commentary, though even her voice had dropped to a whisper. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jeremiah said, his voice carrying clearly through first class and into the rows behind. "I apologize for the disruption to your travel today." Something in his tone made everyone stop talking. Even Karen's stream went quiet, her audience of nearly 1,500 viewers hanging on every word. "There seems to be some confusion about my presence on this aircraft." Jeremiah pulled a single document from his portfolio, holding it so everyone could see the official letterhead. "I'd like to clear that up now." Marcus Williams was backing away, his face a mask of horror as he realized what was about to happen. 23 years with the company, and he was about to witness a career-ending moment. Karen stepped closer with her phone, determined to capture whatever document this teenager thought would save him from embarrassment. "This better be good," she muttered to her audience, not realizing her microphone was picking up everything. It was about to be better than she could possibly imagine, and infinitely worse than she could possibly survive. Jeremiah held the document up so everyone in first class could see the official letterhead. The logo was unmistakable, the same one that appeared on every safety card, every piece of airline literature, every employee badge in the cabin. "This is a board resolution," he said quietly, "dated 3 days ago." Karen zoomed in with her phone, trying to read the text. Her audience was at peak attention. Over 2,000 viewers now, comments flying faster than humanly possible to read. "Effective immediately," Jeremiah continued. "Upon the medical leave of CEO Jeremiah Washington II due to stroke-related complications, interim operational authority is transferred to..." He paused, looking directly at Karen's camera. "Jeremiah Washington III. That's me." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus Williams dropped his tablet. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing through the cabin like a gunshot. His face had gone from pale to ashen, the color of someone watching their career implode in real time. Karen's phone kept recording, but no words came out of her mouth. Her face cycled through expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, the slow dawning realization of what she'd just done. Her viewer count was climbing past 2,500, but the comments were no longer supportive. "Furthermore," Jeremiah continued, his voice still calm but now carrying unmistakable authority, "the resolution grants full authority over personnel decisions, operational procedures, and customer service policies during the transition period." Captain Foster stood at attention now, not the nervous deference from before, but full military bearing. 30 years of flying had taught him to recognize command presence, and this teenager possessed it in abundance. Lisa Rodriguez had gone pale. 8 years of customer service experience, and she'd never seen anything like this. Her training manual had no section on what to do when a passenger turns out to be your CEO. The security officers exchanged glances, suddenly unsure why they'd been called. The problem passenger they'd come to remove was now looking more like the person who signed their paychecks. David Kim's Twitter fingers were flying. His thread was exploding across social media. "Breaking," he typed. "The teenager accused of fraud is actually the CEO of the airline. This is the most insane thing I've ever witnessed on a plane. The tweet was retweeted 400 times in 30 seconds. In economy class, passengers were straining to hear what was happening. Flight attendants were whispering urgently among themselves. Word was spreading through the aircraft like wildfire. Something unprecedented was happening in first class. The elderly couple who'd been whispering support for Karen were now trying to disappear into their seats. The husband was methodically deleting his own photos of the incident, while his wife stared fixedly out the window. Karen finally found her voice. That's impossible. You're just a kid. This is some kind of joke. Her Instagram Live comments were brutal now. Delete this stream. You're finished. This kid owns the airline. Screenshots were being taken faster than she could process what was happening. Jeremiah reached back into his portfolio and pulled out a second document. Here's yesterday's Wall Street Journal, he said, unfolding the business section. Page 1 of the business section. Washington Airlines CEO suffers stroke, son prepared to take interim role. He held it up. Sure enough, there was a photo. A professional headshot of a younger-looking Jeremiah in a suit, standing next to an older black man in front of an airplane. The resemblance was unmistakable. The headline read, At 16, Washington Airlines youngest interim CEO in aviation history. The article, Jeremiah continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd grown up in boardrooms, mentions that the transition has been planned for months, that I've been shadowing executives, attending strategy meetings, learning operations from the ground up. Karen's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone steady. Her live stream was chaos. People were joining just to watch the meltdown, sharing the link across every platform imaginable. But the people watching in person were experiencing something different. This wasn't just about a mistaken identity anymore. This was about power, real power, and what happened when you attacked someone who had more of it than you could imagine. The article also mentions, Jeremiah continued conversationally, that I've been preparing for this role since I was 12. Board meetings, operational training, financial analysis, customer service evaluation. My father believed in learning the business from the ground up. He gestured around the cabin with a slight smile, including understanding what our customers experience when they fly with us, especially customers who might not look like traditional first-class passengers. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Williams was hyperventilating. 23 years with the company. His pension was 18 months away. His daughter was starting college in the fall, and he'd just publicly humiliated the person who could end his career with a phone call. Mr. Washington, he stammered, his voice breaking. Sir, I didn't know. I was just trying to follow protocol. Of course you didn't know, Jeremiah replied, his tone neither angry nor forgiving, just matter of fact. How could you? I was just a black kid in a hoodie sitting where someone like me wasn't supposed to be. The words landed like physical blows. Karen was still filming, but her commentary had stopped entirely. The comments on her live stream had turned vicious. People were screenshotting her profile, sharing her employer information, calling for boycotts of her company. The young mother with the baby was recording too now, her phone capturing Karen's meltdown for her own social media followers. This is why you mind your own business, she whispered to her camera. Karma is real, y'all. Other passengers were frantically Googling Jeremiah Washington Airline CEO. The results were overwhelming. Forbes articles, business journals, aviation industry publications. The kid they'd been watching get humiliated was worth an estimated $2.3 billion. Ma'am? Jeremiah addressed Karen directly, his voice cutting through the chaos of her collapsing live stream. You said I don't belong in first class. You said I was obviously lying about my ticket. You said airline security was everyone's responsibility. Karen nodded mutely, still holding her phone but no longer able to speak to her audience. You also said this had nothing to do with race, Jeremiah continued, that you'd question anyone who looked out of place. He paused, letting that statement settle over the cabin. I'm curious about that. Because earlier today, I watched you board this aircraft. You walked past a man in first class wearing flip-flops, board shorts, and a tank top that says, "Spring Break Forever." You didn't question his presence. Karen's eyes darted toward the passenger Jeremiah was describing. He was indeed dressed exactly as stated, looking like he'd come straight from a beach vacation. He was now sinking lower in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. You also passed a woman traveling with 3 small children, all of whom were crying and climbing over the seats during boarding. You didn't suggest she might have the wrong tickets. True again. The woman in question was now staring at Karen with obvious disgust, her arms protectively around her children. There's a man in row 2 wearing a tracksuit and gold chains counting cash openly. You didn't find that suspicious. Every passenger Jeremiah mentioned was real, their presence confirming the selective nature of Karen's security concerns. But a black teenager reading quietly in his assigned seat, bothering no one, making no noise? That was the security threat that required live streaming and public humiliation? Karen tried to speak, but no words came. Her face was streaked with tears, her professional composure completely shattered. The social media explosion was reaching critical mass. Hashtag first-class racism had evolved into hashtag Jeremiah Washington, which was trending worldwide. News outlets were scrambling to confirm the story. CNN was already preparing a breaking news segment. Stock analysts were watching Washington Airlines shares, waiting to see how the market would react to viral footage of their teenage CEO being discriminated against on his own airline. "Mr. Washington," Captain Foster said formally, his military bearing now complete. "What are your instructions, sir?" It was the question everyone was waiting for. Karen's career, Marcus's pension, the flight itself, everything hung in the balance. Jeremiah looked around the cabin, meeting the eyes of every passenger who'd been watching the confrontation. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that people who'd been filming him were now averting their cameras, as if suddenly aware they were in the presence of royalty. "First," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone born to leadership, "we're going to Los Angeles. These passengers have places to be, and we've delayed them long enough." Relief flickered across several faces. "Second, I want to address what just happened here. Not just with Ms. Mitchell, but with the systemic issues her behavior represents." He pulled out his own phone, not an iPhone like most teenagers carried, but a secure executive device, and opened an app that showed real-time company data. Washington Airlines processes approximately 847,000 passengers per week across 1,247 daily flights. We generate $47.8 billion in annual revenue. We employ 127,000 people worldwide. The numbers landed with the weight of absolute authority. This wasn't just a rich kid with a trust fund. This was someone who controlled an empire. This morning's incident, which is now being viewed by millions of people across social media platforms, represents a fundamental failure, not just in our training or our policies, but in our culture. Karen was crying now, quietly but visibly. Her Instagram audience had swelled to over 4,000 viewers, all watching her entire world collapse in real time. "Ms. Mitchell," Jeremiah said, his voice gentler but still firm, "you made certain assumptions about me based on my appearance. You live-streamed those assumptions to thousands of people. You turned a routine flight into a public humiliation." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, her phone still recording her own destruction. "But more than that, you revealed something about how we as a company have failed. Failed to create an environment where such assumptions feel inappropriate, where staff would intervene immediately, where other passengers would speak up against obvious discrimination." He looked at Marcus, at Lisa, at the security officers who were still standing awkwardly in the aisle, at the passengers who'd watched it all happen. "That changes today." The cabin was so quiet you could hear individual passengers breathing. Karen's live stream had become appointment viewing. People were texting friends to tune in, sharing links across every platform, watching history being made in real time. But first, Jeremiah said, folding the documents and returning them to his portfolio, I have one more thing to show you. He reached deeper into the leather case and pulled out something that made Captain Foster's eyes widen with recognition and respect. A small, worn leather journal. The kind used for important records, family histories, things that mattered beyond business. This belonged to my grandfather, Jeremiah said, his voice softer now, carrying decades of family pride and pain. Jeremiah Washington Verfurge. He was a Tuskegee airman. The historical weight of that statement settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. Even passengers unfamiliar with the full history understood the significance. He fought for the right to fly when people said black men didn't belong in cockpits. He served his country with honor when his country didn't honor him back. Jeremiah opened the journal carefully, revealing pages of handwritten notes, old photographs, military commendations. My father built an airline when people said we didn't belong in boardrooms. He started with one plane, a dream, and a determination to prove that excellence has no color. He looked directly at Karen's camera, speaking to her audience of thousands, but also to the millions who would see this footage in the hours to come. And today, I'm sitting in first class on my own airline, being told I don't belong there. He closed the journal carefully, reverently. Some stories, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of generations, repeat themselves until someone has the power to change the ending. The weight of 3 generations of Washington family legacy settled over the cabin like authority itself. Jeremiah carefully returned his grandfather's journal to the portfolio, then looked up at the assembled group, passengers, crew, security, all waiting for his next words. Now, he said, his voice carrying the quiet power of someone who'd inherited both wealth and responsibility, let's talk about what happens next. He pulled out his executive phone and opened a detailed analytics dashboard. The screen showed real-time data that only C-suite executives had access to. Ms. Mitchell, your Instagram Live has been viewed 4.2 million times in the past 37 minutes. The video is being shared across platforms at a rate of 12,000 shares per minute. Jeremiah Washington is trending in 43 countries. Karen's face went from pale to green. She was still holding her phone, but her live stream had devolved into chaos. Comments moving too fast to read, her follower count actually dropping as people unfollowed her in real time. The financial impact of this incident is already measurable, Jeremiah continued, scrolling through reports that were updating in real time. Our social media monitoring system shows Washington Airlines mentioned in 847,000 posts in the last hour. Sentiment analysis is complicated. He held up the phone so Captain Foster could see the dashboard. 67% positive sentiment, praising our company for having young black leadership. 31% negative, criticizing us for allowing discrimination to occur. 2% neutral. Marcus Williams was taking notes frantically, as if documenting his own professional execution. From a legal standpoint, Jeremiah continued, his tone becoming more businesslike, Ms. Mitchell has created significant liability exposure for both herself and potentially her employer. He swiped to another screen. Federal aviation regulations, specifically 14 CFR Section 382, prohibit discrimination against passengers. Civil rights violations under Section 1983 carry damages averaging $1.8 million in settled cases. Karen tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. I didn't know. Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Jeremiah continued, as if reading from a legal brief, specifically covers public accommodations, including commercial aircraft. Violations can result in both monetary damages and injunctive relief. He looked up from his phone. That means, Ms. Mitchell, that you've potentially exposed yourself to federal civil rights charges, regardless of whether I choose to pursue them. The security officers exchanged glances. This wasn't the kind of passenger dispute they were trained to handle. This was more like watching a federal case being built in real time. But legal consequences are just one aspect, Jeremiah said, switching screens again. Let's discuss the broader implications. David Kim was furiously tweeting updates, his thread now approaching 50,000 retweets. Other passengers were filming their own response videos, turning the cabin into a real-time content creation studio. Washington Airlines stock is currently trading at $347.23 per share, Jeremiah announced, checking a financial app. In the past hour, volume has increased 340% above normal trading levels. The market is watching this story very carefully. He turned to Marcus Williams. Mr. Williams, in your 23 years with the company, how many discrimination complaints have you personally handled? Marcus stammered, clearly calculating in his head. Maybe 15? 20? Our internal records show 17 formal complaints filed against gate agents and ground staff in the Atlanta hub alone over the past 18 months, Jeremiah corrected. All involving passengers of color being questioned about their ticket validity or seat assignments. The number hung in the air like an indictment of the entire system. None of those complaints resulted in policy changes. None resulted in additional training. None resulted in consequences for the staff involved. Lisa Rodriguez was taking mental notes, realizing she was witnessing a masterclass in corporate accountability. That pattern, Jeremiah continued, suggests systemic issues rather than isolated incidents, which brings us to today's decisions. He looked directly at Karen, who was still crying quietly, her phone shaking in her hands. Ms. Mitchell, you have 3 options. I'm going to lay them out clearly, and you can choose how you want this story to end. The cabin was silent, except for the ambient noise of the aircraft and Karen's barely audible sobs. Option 1. You can continue your live stream, apologize publicly to me, and to the passengers who witnessed your behavior, acknowledge that your actions were based on racial bias, and commit to diversity training. In return, I won't pursue legal action, and Washington Airlines will implement a passenger dignity protocol in your honor. Karen looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Option 2. You can end your stream now, delete the video, and pretend this never happened. In which case, I will file federal discrimination charges, pursue maximum damages under civil rights law, and ensure this incident becomes a case study in every business school in America. The hope died quickly. Option 3. You can continue broadcasting, maintain that your actions weren't discriminatory, and defend your behavior. In that case, I will not only pursue all legal remedies, but I will also personally ensure that every airline, hotel, and transportation company in America knows exactly who you are and how you treat their customers. The ultimatum was delivered with the calm precision of someone who'd learned negotiation from billionaire parents. Karen tried to speak, her voice barely audible. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell the truth, Jeremiah replied simply. To your audience, to these passengers, to yourself. Why did you single me out? What was it about my appearance that made you assume I didn't belong in first class? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Karen's live stream was still running, still being watched by thousands of people, still recording her potential redemption or complete destruction. Karen struggled with the words. I saw a young black man in casual clothes and I assumed... You assumed what? That you couldn't afford first class, that you were trying to scam the system, that you were dangerous. The admission fell like a stone into still water. And why did you make those assumptions? Karen was crying harder now, but she was finally being honest. Because that's what I've been taught to think. What I've always thought. That people who look like you don't belong in spaces like this. Jeremiah nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. He turned to address the entire cabin, his voice carrying to the passengers in economy who were straining to hear. This is what systemic racism looks like, he said calmly. Not burning crosses or violent hatred, just assumptions, Just the belief that certain people don't belong in certain places. Just the confidence to act on those assumptions publicly. Captain Foster stepped forward. Mr. Washington, what are your instructions for the crew? First, we implement the passenger dignity protocol effective immediately. Any customer complaint based solely on appearance or assumptions about economic status gets flagged for review by diversity officers. He swiped to another screen on his phone. Second, we establish a direct reporting system. Passengers can text complaints directly to a diversity hotline that reports to my office. Marcus Williams was writing frantically, realizing his job might depend on how well he implemented these changes. Third, we partner with the NAACP and other civil rights organizations to conduct monthly audits of our customer service practices. Full transparency, public reports. The scope of the changes was breathtaking. Jeremiah wasn't just addressing this incident, he was using it to transform an entire industry. Mr. Williams, you'll oversee the implementation in Atlanta. Consider it your path to redemption. Marcus nodded eagerly, relief flooding his face. Captain Foster, I want crew training on unconscious bias to begin next week, mandatory for all customer-facing staff. Yes, sir. And Ms. Rodriguez, Jeremiah turned to the flight attendant. You handled this situation with professionalism despite the circumstances. You're being promoted to our new Chief Customer Experience Officer position. Salary increase of 40% effective immediately. Lisa's eyes widened in shock and gratitude. Karen was still holding her phone, still live streaming, but her audience had swelled to over 6,000 viewers. The comments were split between those calling for her complete destruction and those praising her for finally telling the truth. Ms. Mitchell, Jeremiah said gently, you chose option 1. You told the truth. That took courage, even if it came late. He pulled a business card from his portfolio. This is the contact information for our diversity training program. 6 months, fully paid, with job protection guaranteed by federal anti-retaliation laws. Your employer will receive a letter explaining that you're participating in court-approved sensitivity training. Karen took the card with shaking hands. But understand this, Jeremiah continued, his voice hardening slightly. This is your one chance. If you ever discriminate against anyone again, anywhere, and it reaches me, there will be no options, no negotiations, no second chances. The warning was delivered with the quiet authority of someone who had both the resources and the will to follow through. Do you understand? Karen nodded, tears still streaming down her face. Yes. Yes, I understand, and I'm sorry. To you, to your family, to everyone watching. I was wrong. Jeremiah studied her for a moment, then nodded. Apology accepted. But more importantly, make sure your actions going forward prove you meant it. He looked around the cabin one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to Los Angeles. When we land, this story will probably be on the news. You've all witnessed something that will be studied and discussed for years to come. He paused, letting that sink in. Use that opportunity wisely. 3 hours later, Flight 447 touched down at Los Angeles International Airport. What had started as a routine Tuesday morning flight had become the most documented air travel incident in social media history. As passengers deplaned, many stopped to shake Jeremiah's hand, take photos, or simply thank him for handling the situation with such grace. But the real work was just beginning. By the time Jeremiah reached the gate, Washington Airlines' crisis management team was already in motion. His assistant, Maria Santos, met him with a tablet full of updates. Sir, CNN wants a statement in 20 minutes. The stock closed up 12%. The NAACP called. They want to discuss a formal partnership, and your father's hospital called. He's asking to see the news coverage. Jeremiah smiled at that last update. His father's recovery was ahead of schedule, driven partly by pride in watching his son handle his first major crisis with such composure. Within the week, the changes Jeremiah had announced at 30,000 feet became reality. The Passenger Dignity Protocol was implemented across all 1,247 daily flights. Any staff member who received a complaint based solely on a passenger's appearance was required to complete immediate bias training before their next shift. The Diversity Hotline received 2,847 texts in its first month. Most were minor issues quickly resolved, but 127 flagged serious discrimination concerns that might have gone unaddressed under the old system. Karen Mitchell completed her 6-month diversity training program. Her employer, initially considering termination, instead promoted her to head their new corporate inclusion initiative. Her viral breakdown had become a case study in personal growth and systemic change. Marcus Williams threw himself into implementing the new protocols with the enthusiasm of someone who'd narrowly avoided professional disaster. Under his leadership, discrimination complaints in the Atlanta hub dropped by 89% within 6 months. Lisa Rodriguez thrived in her new role as Chief Customer Experience Officer. Her first initiative was training flight attendants to recognize unconscious bias, training that became the industry standard within 18 months. But the impact extended far beyond Washington Airlines. Delta, American, United, and Southwest all implemented similar passenger dignity protocols within 90 days. The Department of Transportation launched a comprehensive review of discrimination in commercial aviation. Congress held hearings on bias in travel, using Jeremiah's incident as a primary case study. The video of Karen's confrontation and Jeremiah's response became required viewing in business schools across the country. Harvard Business School developed an entire course around the incident: Crisis Leadership and Social Justice in Corporate America. International airlines began requesting consultation on bias prevention. The Washington Protocol became shorthand for comprehensive anti-discrimination policies in transportation. Most significantly, the incident sparked broader conversations about assumptions, privilege, and belonging in American society. The hashtag #WhoDeservesFirstClass trended for months as people shared their own stories of being judged based on appearance. Jeremiah used his newfound platform strategically. He established the Washington Foundation for Transportation Equity, providing scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation, logistics, and transportation management. The Foundation's first initiative funded 50 full scholarships to pilot training programs for Black and Latino students. Within 2 years, Washington Airlines had hired 37 of those graduates. 6 months after the incident, Jeremiah was invited to speak at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's annual convention. His speech, titled "When Assumptions Meet Authority," was viewed 12.7 million times on YouTube. Real change, he told the audience, doesn't come from anger or revenge. It comes from having the power to transform systems and the wisdom to use that power responsibly. The applause lasted 4 minutes. By his 17th birthday, Jeremiah had been featured on Time magazine's list of most influential teenagers, Forbes 30 under 30, and invited to speak at the United Nations about discrimination in global transportation. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. A year after the incident, Jeremiah received a handwritten letter from a retired Tuskegee airman who had served with his grandfather. "Young man," the letter read, "your grandfather would be proud. He fought for the right to fly. You've ensured future generations will fly with dignity. Well done." The letter now sits framed in Jeremiah's office, next to his grandfather's journal, and a photo from that day on Flight 447. A reminder that some victories echo across generations. Karen Mitchell, meanwhile, had become an unlikely advocate for racial justice. Her transformation from viral villain to diversity champion became its own inspiring story, proving that even the most public failures could become opportunities for growth and redemption. She often spoke at corporate training sessions, sharing her story with brutal honesty. "I thought I was protecting other passengers," she would tell audiences, "but I was really protecting my own prejudices. The scariest part wasn't being wrong, it was realizing how confident I was in my wrongness." The ripple effects continued expanding. Other industries began implementing their own versions of the Washington Protocol. Hotels, restaurants, retail chains, anywhere customer service intersected with potential bias. These black stories, these real-life stories of discrimination and triumph, became touching stories that resonated across racial lines. White executives began sharing their own moments of unconscious bias. Parents used Jeremiah's example to teach their children about assumptions and fairness. The incident had transformed from a moment of individual humiliation into a catalyst for systemic change. But for Jeremiah, the most important outcome was simpler: his father's full recovery and return to active leadership 6 months ahead of medical projections. "You did more in one flight than I accomplished in 10 years of board meetings," Jeremiah Washington II told his son during their first joint presentation to shareholders. The company's stock price had stabilized at a 23% increase from pre-incident levels. Customer satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Employee diversity increased across all levels of the organization. More importantly, the culture had shifted. Stories like Karen's initial behavior became cautionary tales shared in employee training. Stories like Jeremiah's response became examples of leadership under pressure. The airline industry would never be quite the same, and neither would the assumptions people made about who belonged where. 2 years later, Jeremiah Washington III stands in his corner office, no longer interim CEO, but permanent leader of a transformed company. At 18, he's proven that power used wisely can break cycles of discrimination. The office walls tell the story. Photos from Flight 447 hang beside certificates from civil rights organizations worldwide. His grandfather's Tuskegee Airman Journal sits open to a page reading, "Dignity is not given, it is claimed." Washington Airlines now processes over 1 million passengers weekly with a discrimination complaint rate below 0.003%, the lowest in aviation history. The Washington Protocol has been adopted by transportation systems in 47 countries. Karen Mitchell transformed from viral villain to respected diversity consultant. Her company, Second Chance Solutions, helps organizations turn discrimination incidents into learning opportunities. She still carries the business card Jeremiah gave her, a reminder of how quickly redemption becomes possible. Marcus Williams retired with his pension intact, his reputation redeemed. Lisa Rodriguez now travels internationally, training staff on dignity protocols. Her book became required reading in hospitality programs. These life stories, redemption, second chances, recognition, leadership, became the foundation for countless other touching stories of transformation. The boy told he didn't belong in first class now ensures everyone belongs everywhere they have the right to be. Real-life stories like Jeremiah's prove that the most powerful response to hatred isn't anger. It's the quiet strength to transform systems. Black stories matter because they show possibilities we might not have imagined. They demonstrate that dignity and preparation can triumph over discrimination every time. Your voice matters in creating change like Jeremiah's. Have you witnessed discrimination in travel or daily life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could help others recognize and confront bias. Have you seen someone turn injustice into an opportunity for positive change? Tell us about it. These real-life stories inspire strategic action over anger. Subscribe to Black Voices Speak for more stories of quiet strength overcoming loud prejudice. Hit that notification bell because the next time someone assumes you don't belong somewhere, you'll be ready with tools to prove them wrong and change the system forever. Share this story. Let it reach those who need to confront their biases and young people who need to see that dignity can triumph over discrimination. Because every interaction is an opportunity to choose dignity over prejudice. Make that choice.